Hey everybody, welcome to the Thoughtful Bro. We are back after 2 weeks off. It feels so good to be here. I'm so psyched. I've been looking forward to doing this interview the whole time. I've been unwrapping and wrapping Christmas presents. This is a great way to come back. Thank you everybody online for joining us. It's going to be amazing today. So I want to start off with a few thoughts at the top as usual. As you know, this is the Thoughtful Bro live streaming on a mighty blaze. We're here every Tuesday at 2 o'clock to talk about what makes great books tick, what makes great authors tick. We're AMB, a Mighty Blaze. We're an all-volunteer organization. We formed at the beginning of COVID because all of our writer friends and people in publishing all had their IRL book tours get canceled. So, we're putting up about another 10 videos every week with newly released books. Recent interviews that I've done this fall include Jesse, Tom Perrotta, Phil Cly, Maggie O'Farrell, Frederick Joseph, Erica Jong, John Irving, and more. I didn't do all of those. I didn't do John Irving and Erica Jong. But you can find it all on the Mighty Blaze website. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, all the socials. And honestly, we're not asking for your money. All we're asking is that you support these authors that are on there. If you're in the mood to spend a little money, you should not spend it on us. You should spend it on high quality books like this one that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. For this interview, if you have any questions, of course, just pop them in the chat and they will make their way to me, and I'll ask Mateo anything you guys want to talk about at all. This is a safe space. Ask any question, and Mateo's a really cool guy. He's up for anything. So just pop it in the chat. Next week, actually, I just want to tease next week for a second. We have a super cool guest and to give a little bit of literary history here for me. In 1996, Charlie Rose, he hosted this legendary interview, which you can find on YouTube, where he talked about the future of American fiction. He had 3 guests on that show. Number 1 was David Foster Wallace. Number 2 was Jonathan Franzen. And number 3 is a gentleman named Mark Lehner, who's going to be on this show next week. So 25 years later, checking in with a guy who was the future of American fiction and has just put out a new book. It's fantastic. It's called The Last Orgy of the Divine Hermit. So that's Mark Lehner next week on the Thoughtful Bro. But on to this week, let's go. So Mateo Askaripour is a writer whose work has appeared in LitHub, Electric Literature, Entrepreneur, and Medium, among other places. His debut novel, Black Buck, right there. It draws on his experience navigating the New York City startup culture where he was remarkably put in charge of a sales force of 30 people at the age of 24. Black Buck explores ambition, race, and New York City millennial hustle culture. It's sort of a mashup between Sorry to Bother You and The Wolf of Wall Street, which are both favorites of mine. So this book is like a direct bullseye for my tastes. The book's tagline, which I really love, is, quote, "There's nothing like a black salesman on a mission." Black Buck was recently selected by Jenna Bush Hager on the Today Show for her Reading with Jenna January selection, which is amazing. This book is just good news for this book like every day. No less than 2-time Pulitzer winner Colson Whitehead said Mateo, quote, "closes the deal on the first page of this mesmerizing novel, executing a high wire act full of verve and dark comic energy." And because, as you know, I always love to include at least one review from a Goodreads reviewer. I love this one. Goodreads, they tend to just it's always a little bit more raw and a little bit more succinct, but here's one of my favorites. Mateo Askaripour's debut, Black Buck, is a wildly batshit absurdist satire on startup culture, racism in America, media fuckery, New York City, and so much more. Mateo, welcome to the Thoughtful Bro.
Good God, Mark, how am I supposed to keep up with all of that, man? And they're talking about me. Media fuckery, I love that, but I'm still stuck on the orgy of the divine hermit because people have been giving me shit for my title. I gotta cite that as a real title to take issue with. Thank you so much for having me on here, man. Again, when I found out that I'd be on here, I was just so excited, and the day is finally here. To everyone who's watching, like Mark said, ask me absolutely anything and everything. Challenge me, because I feel like I don't have the right to challenge you with my work and not be challenged back. I'm going to jump into a quick reading, if that's okay.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, before you do that, can you just tell the audience what the book is about, and then let's go for the reading after that.
Perfect. So Black Buck is about a young man named Darren. He is 22. He's living in Bedside, Brooklyn with his mother. He has a girlfriend, his best friend, and he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. He's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this suave, good-looking white dude named Rhett Daniels comes in. He actually looks a little bit like Mark. And he's the CEO of a tech startup called Someone. And he comes in and he says, "Give me my regular." But for some reason, our protagonist says no. And the dude's like, "Give me my regular." And Darren sells him on another drink. So Rhett, impressed, invites him up to the 36th floor. And he says that Darren can join the sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he finds out that he's not the only Black salesman there. He's the only Black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to get to the top. And once he's there, he says, "You know what? I don't like being the token Black dude." So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace.
Boom. There it is, man. What a pitch.
Boom.
If you can't
And
tell,
you know what?
Mateo, if it's not obvious already what a gifted salesman Mateo is, like there you just saw it in action. So you're going to do a reading and then just quickly explain like what the reading is in the voice of, just so people understand.
Sure. And thank you for bringing up that context, because it seems like a handful of people who read the book, especially at the beginning, think that it's me writing the author's note, when this book, Black Book, is actually written by our protagonist, Darren, a few years removed from when majority of the book takes place and when it begins. So I'll open up with the author's note. And we haven't even begun selling yet, so now we'll begin, Mark. There's nothing like a Black man on a mission. No, let me revise that. There's nothing like a Black salesman on a mission. He's Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, and any other supernatural, paranormal, or otherwise godlike combination of blood, flesh, and brains. He can't die. Don't believe me? Hey, yes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a Black salesman. In the same way used car salesmen hawk overpriced hunks of metal that break down once an unsuspecting car is off the lot, our man ML to the K was a salesman to the highest degree. Not only did he sell Black on the vision of a unified America, but he also sold the United States Supreme Court, which at the time contained 9 white men, the hardest decision makers for any Black man to convince. MLK, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Frederick Douglass were all salesmen. Hell, Nina Simone, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, and every other Black woman who achieved any leap of success was a saleswoman. Oprah hide a BMW under your seat. Winfrey is a saleswoman. You get the point. Each and every one of these people was selling something more precious than gold, a vision for what the world could look like if millions of people were to change their minds, the hardest thing to change. How do I fit into all of this? Well, I shut up and get to the point. Don't worry, I'm getting there. I'm a Black man on a mission. No, I'm a Black salesman on a mission. And the point of this book, which I'm writing from my penthouse overlooking Central Park, is to help other women on a mission to sell their visions all the way to the top. So high up that I'll have to crane my neck, like one of those goofy white people in films deciding whether a superhero is a bird or a plane, just to catch a glimpse of them before they're out of sight. Whoosh, bang, poof, the great disappearing act of success. My goal is to teach you how to sell. And if I'm half the salesman every newspaper, blog, and hustler in New York City says I am, then you are in luck. With my story, I will give you the tools to go out and create the life you want, to overcome every seemingly impossible obstacle, to fix the game. Which game, you ask? We'll get there. But before we do, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. Number 1, let down your guard and open your mind to what I'm going to tell you. I know we're strangers right now. You're likely asking yourself why you should trust me. The good thing is that you already bought this book, so you trusted me enough to part with $26. I won't let you down. Number 2, understand that I want all people to be successful, but in the same way that Starbucks can't just give out mocha frappuccinos to anyone who doesn't have $14, I can't help everyone. So I'm starting with Black people. If you're not Black but have this book in your hands, I want you to think of yourself as an honorary Black person. Go on, do it. Don't go don blackface and an afro, but picture yourself as Black. And if you want, you can even give yourself a fancy Black name, like Jamal, Imani, or Asia. Number 3, say every day is deals day and clap your hands. I know it's strange, but do it. And when you do, think of the number 1 thing you're working toward. It may be a new car, a promotion, someone's affection, or an expensive pair of shoes. Whatever it is, think of it and say, every day is deals day. And clap your hands as loud as you can. As you'll find out, every day is deals day. A day without deals is like a camel without humps. It doesn't exist. At this point, your heart's beating and there's a twinkle in your eye. I know because I've given this speech before. I've given it to myself. I've given it to thousands of people wanting to change their lives. And I've even given it to people who didn't know they wanted to change, but needed it. A long time ago, I was one of these people. I was like you, ambitious but afraid, intelligent but impotent, curious but cowardly. I was all of this and more. But freedom, true freedom, the kind where you do what you want without fear, comes at a cost. It's like my urban corner philosopher come fairy god Uncle Wally Cat used to say, you can change the hands of a clock, but you can't change time. I can give you the tools to change, but only you can change yourself. And if I'm successful in teaching you how to sell and fix the game, I ask that you buy another copy of my book and give it to the friend who needs it most, who was stuck like I was and in need of a way out, who is blind to the game but has potential, just like you. Does that sound fair? If so, and if you can do the 3 things I outlined above, then we have a deal. And if we have a deal, it's time for you to do one last thing. Turn the page. Happy selling, Buck.
Yeah, I've only got one thing to say about that
Woo.
reading. Every day is deals day.
There we go, baby.
Dude, you know what's funny about that is that hearing that now after having just read the book, I see that that is sort of like a, what do you call it? A compilation of so many different things that you return to in the book. It's like so many of those sayings that you return to. Like, I love that one, like, is this fair? And how like you always close a kind of call or an interaction with, is this fair? And if you get them on board with, is this fair? That helps like seal the relationship, which I thought was like such an interesting technique that I hadn't heard before. But there were so many things like that in that opening. It really is like an overture for the book.
Exactly. Yeah, it's foreshadowing a lot of bits and pieces that come up later for sure.
Right on. Okay, so God, there's like so much I want to get into, but you know, it's just interesting. So I think that like there's like 2 things that this book is hitting on, which are like just so right now. One of them clearly is race, and like everybody in this country right now is so hungry to try to figure out race from whatever side of that issue they may be on, and kind of come up with a new dialogue about it. And then another one is just entrepreneurship and capitalism. And it's like, so like in the last month, I had on Frederick Joseph talking about The Black Friend. And then I had this guy, Reeves Weidman, talking about a book called $1 Billion Loser about the collapse of WeWork. And it's like, this book is sort of like both of those. It's about a kind of like startup insane culture, and it's about race as well. So I just think you are totally on point with what the issues are. But anyway, I want to start and say, like, let's just first talk about the title of the book, Black Buck. Now, that is like a loaded cultural, historical term. And I've heard you talk about it in a really interesting way about why you chose to use it. So can you just talk about the title?
Most definitely, and thanks for the question. So I didn't pick this title willy-nilly. I didn't wake up one day and say, Black Buck, there it is. Let me just really fuck with people. That wasn't it, you know, and it also, to be transparent, wasn't my first title. But there's a few meanings to it. One is that our character, Darren, when he gets into the startup called Someone, is renamed Buck. That it becomes his nickname, and he's black. That's number 1, Black Buck. 2 is that he worked at Starbucks previously. So that also is just, you know, paying tribute, but alluding to the fact that he was there beforehand as a shift supervisor. 3 is the idea of black wealth, right? And the wealth inequality gap, and hoping that some of the maxims in this book or pieces of advice, as you just said, Mark, right, about positioning a question as, does that sound fair in a negotiation, using those tips and the narrative itself as a means to help accrue some money, if not wealth, and get some coin and some bread for yourself and your community. So that's the 3rd meaning. But the most, I guess, bombastic definition is the historical one, which is a black buck was the enslaved person, enslaved male that the enslavers believed was unruly, untamable, big and brawny, and was going to burn down the plantation and steal all the women and livestock and all of that great stuff. So in that context of what a black buck meant, I said, okay, Darren isn't going into these workplaces and literally burning them down from the inside out, but he is burning down what they symbolize by the end of the book. So while some people could say, hey, that title is just like really loaded and a little triggering, that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to provoke, it was to take the historical energy and reclaim it for this 21st century narrative.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's hard to kind of say, but it's hard to express because the book expresses it so well. But that the Black Buck as a title conveys, I think, kind of the exact energy of the book. It's sort of like, it's provocative. It's like speaking to something bigger. It's sort of like quick and funny and like also like tragic. It's the perfect title for this book. I think I loved it. All right, let's talk about the style of the book. So it is it's a narrative. Yes, it's a good story, but it's also this kind of a self-help a sales manual, a self-help manual for people of color, kind of trying to break into a white-dominated corporate world. Tell me about this style, which I really enjoyed. I kind of thought of it sometimes like Black Buck or Darren kind of coming in and making his little comments, like in offset comments. It was sort of like a Greek chorus almost, like commenting on the action in its own kind of weird American capitalistic way. But tell me about that style.
Most definitely. So from the first night that I began the book, and Mark, I don't even write at night, but I was just hit. I knew that I wanted to begin a third manuscript because my first two failed. I didn't achieve any of my aims with them. So it was January 2018. I knew that I wanted to begin writing a new book, and I had the kernel of an idea. But on that night that it just hit me, the voice of Darren spoke through my fingers. And we have some similarities, but we also have many differences. And Darren says things in ways that I wouldn't always. And he has a sense of humor that is a bit darker than mine, but that I leaned into myself while writing the book. But from that first night, I knew that I wanted it to not just be an engaging narrative, but to also double as a sales manual to help people, as you said, get ahead and attain some gems to help get their friends and family ahead too. So I knew that I wanted it to be in some ways instructive, not just like a full sermon. No one's going to read 400 pages of someone preaching at you. I mean, they will. They buy self-help books where people are just screaming at them, right? Like David Goggins or someone. But that's not what I wanted in this book. So it was around the fourth draft. You know, I'd had the bones of the book already written. I actually had to cut down a lot. But it was in the fourth draft that I said, you know what? Why don't I just break the fourth wall very conspicuously, bold it, address the reader, and set it away from or apart from the preceding and succeeding paragraphs, just so the reader knows, hey, I'm talking to you, and I'm giving you this tip, or I'm commenting on a particularly tough time that me, Darren, and when I say me, I'm talking about Darren, the author, not, you know, this is going to be weird to refer to myself in third person, Mateo Askaripour, you know what I'm saying? And I also thought that was going to keep readers more engaged during the times that are tougher to read and tougher to get through. And that you believe that you're on the journey with someone who has grown and is writing about his triumphs and his tragedies and his flaws and the greatest parts about himself. But more concretely, the impetus of breaking the fourth wall in that way was the intersection of three main texts. One, there were a couple books by this guy named Jeffrey Gitomer. I was handed these sales manuals when I got into sales many years ago by a co-founder from the company I was working at, the startup. He gave me the Little Red Book of Selling and the Sales Bible. I have them both behind me down there. I ate these books up. They were glossy, they were colorful, but better than that, the tips were no nonsense. It was no BS. It wasn't like, well, you just have to try real hard and then you'll hit your quota. It was none of that. It was like, listen, motherfucker, you got to do this, that, and the other in order to achieve success. And I don't want to hear you crying every day. I know that it's tough, but if you really want to hit your quota, if you really want to be a successful salesperson, you have to first be a good human. And this is how I do it for myself. So that really reached me. Two was How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia by Mohsin Hamid. I read that probably like in college or a little bit after. And at the beginning of every chapter was an adage or a rule of how to get filthy rich in rising Asia. It could be, I don't know, like own a state or privatize a state-owned corporation, right? Like own the water supply or befriend a bureaucrat or stash away a ton of money in a safe in like a dungeon. Just really funny things like that. But at the time when I was writing the book, what tied the knot for me and pushed me was reading Mitchell S. Jackson's The Residue Years, because he just in the paragraph would address his readers by saying people. And it's a work of fiction, but his protagonist would say people and comment on what was going on. So after being hit with that, I was pushed to break the fourth wall. And it seems as though most people like it. So.
Totally. It's great. It adds so much dynamism, and the voice is just spot on. I myself have also read a bunch of those kind of salesy books, corporate books, and it's just like you kind of like. It's interesting. I think like with really successful satire, what happens is it's a parody of the thing, but it's also a genuine version of the thing. Like like works on both levels, and I think that's what you have going on here. So another really interesting thing, by the way, guys, we've got a bunch of questions already, and I will get to them. Yeah, we do.
That's
so give me like another 19 minutes and we're going to get to those questions. But I want to go through a little bit more about the book, and then I also want to talk about your journey as a debut author, which is sort of interesting. But sort of on that latter note, I've heard you say that, like, you wrote those, I think it was 2016, you quit your job and you wanted to be a writer or something like that. And, you wrote 2 books that didn't work out. And then you've described yourself, I've heard you say a couple of times, that it was a creative rock bottom for you. And that creative rock bottom, as creative rock bottoms sometimes do, offer a certain kind of clarity, or like the only way to climb out is with a renewed sense of clarity. And I thought one of the most interesting things that you got clarity on when you were in that abyss was who you're writing for, who the audience is, and like, who are these people? How do they want to be talked to? And the certainty that you could talk to those people. So, and I just want to observe that I just think like that is something, I know so many writers, like basically all my friends are writers, and like it is something that not even a majority of writers really know how to be clear about. And coming from the kind of a sales world myself, having managed a sales team and been in business, it's like without understanding who your customer is, to put it in crass, non-artistic terms, like, how are you going to sell something to somebody you don't even know who they are? So anyway, I found that so interesting. So I just wanted you to talk about who this audience is and how meaningful it was for you to have that clarity about that.
Sure. That's a great one. That's one of those that like only you, from having managed a sales team and also reading widely, could ask me that. So I appreciate that question. A lot of it starts with ruthless self-examination and self-interrogation. And at that point, when I was at that creative rock bottom, I was having hours worth of conversations with myself, ranging from what are you doing? What made you think that you could do this? To why are you writing? And then who are you writing for? And the answer, keeping it a buck with myself, was the first person I'm writing for. It'd be great if I was like my mom. My mom might be watching this. If it was like my mom or my ex or like whomever, or I really wanted to write this, or wrong this right, whatever. It was myself though. The first person I was writing for was myself. I wanted to impress myself. I wanted to write something I would be proud of. And I wanted to write something that felt extremely true and something that I would want to read. That it was really that simple. I wanted to write something that I would want to read. But then after myself, I said, okay, who do I want to serve? And I wanted to serve people like me. Black people, first and foremost, who are the resident other. And it could be in a workplace, or it could be beyond the workplace. It could be in a religious organization. It could be on a sports team. It could be in a myriad of different places. It could be at a bakery, wherever you work, right? I thought about those people. And then I said, okay, other people are also going to read this. So who would those other people be beyond my first 2 audiences of myself and Black people? Anyone else who has ever felt like an other in the face of a majority, whether it is due to your sexual orientation, whether it is due to your gender expression, whether it is due to your religion or your race in a particular place. I wanted them to be able to read this book and say, I may not be a good-looking Black man, and I'm talking about Darren, I'm not talking about myself. But Darren's also 6'2". I'm not tall, but I may not be Darren, right, from bedside working in this place, but his journey speaks to me, and I still feel seen. So gaining that clarity just opened up a world of insight for me, Mark, but beyond that, a world of inspiration.
Yeah.
Because now I knew who I was writing for. So every day when I got to the page, and it could have been a blank Word document, or as time went on, a Word document that was getting fuller, but then a blank chapter, whenever I had any doubts or I wasn't able to gather enough inspiration or motivation for that day, because as you read in the book, right, there's a difference. I thought about those people. And then I said, I have to do this, and I am going to do this. There's no way I'm going to stop.
That's amazing, man. And it's like, a lot of writers kind of like they struggle with writer's block, and they think like, why should I be writing this book? Or like, what am I doing? And like the idea that like having a very specific idea of who your audience is, and it's like, I'm serving those people, that will get you off your ass and probably break a lot of writer's block, because you're like, these people need this message, and I want to get it to them. And I mean, I just want to read like the dedication of this book. You sort of kind of paraphrase it before, but just this is like the first thing you read in this book. To all those who have ever been made to feel less than, I see you. And like, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, man. And I also had to think on that dedication, because I actually had to tell my mom, and I'm sure that she translated this to the rest of my family. And we got, bro, the acknowledgement section is a whole other book. Like, it's another book within a book. It's so long. And shout out to HMH, because they didn't ever say cut it down. But I had to tell my mom, I was like, I love you. You know that I wrote this for you and the family and everyone else. But I'm gonna make this the dedication. And she said, I get it. She gives me allowances here and there of like, okay, all right, I get it. And then other times she'll call me out and say, I saw this event, you're bugging out, please stop cursing.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about like kind of like the business aspects of the book, and sort of like, so first of all, like I said earlier, I ran a sales team in New York City, so we have like something in common that like I have in common with so few other writer people that I know. And I think there's often a kind of like default cynicism or a default anti-capitalism that comes with talking about just any kind of corporate life, but specifically sales. And I think kind of like the kind of figure of American sales in literature is, of course, Willy Loman from Death of a Salesman. And I want to quote something that you wrote in an essay you published in Electric Literature called "Move Over, Willy Loman, America Needs a New Salesman." So you were talking about Wolf of Wall Street, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, and you said, quote, "While American organizations are still disproportionately white, there are minorities of all kinds, like myself, who do not see themselves reflected in Leonardo DiCaprio's blue eyes. Our stories must be told." So I wanted to kind of call that out, and just also like just open up for you to just talk about, why is this a kind of worthy topic? I mean, you do see some of it. I mean, there's Death of a Salesman. Glengarry Glen Ross is, of course, absolutely a classic. It's as electric today as it was, 30 years ago. But, then, there's books like The Circle by David Eggers. There's a kind of book about a parody of office life called We Came to the End by Joshua Ferris. Then you got movies like The Social Network and Wall Street and so on. But, I think like, I just want to hear you talk as somebody who has absolutely written a successful book and who has the experience in sales life. Why is this a kind of interesting and even underserved area of kind of artistic exploration?
Sure. Well, Mark, I firmly believe that sales is as American as baseball, apple pie, or our original commodity. And I say our because I'm an American, slavery, right? It's embedded in the soil of this country, in the fabric of this nation. And it goes back to even before America was America. The people who founded this nation were salesmen. They were selling a bunch of people on, let's get on these rickety ass boats and go across the ocean and try not to die or get smallpox or TB or whatever the hell they were getting back then. Cause I know it was crazier than a lot of stuff that we're experiencing now, even, pandemic withstanding, and let us build this new world, these colonies. And then, they said, actually, let's not build it. Let's just get some Black people to build it and some Native people. But the idea was selling. It's in the very documents that we have. People were selling others on the vision of a new world and a new America. So flash forward, hundreds of years later, not just from the inception of our republic, but even before then, sales is just as American as anything else. And I think that who we think of when we think of a salesperson is truthfully a direct reflection of who we believe represents America and the American dream. So we see Willy Loman, and Willy Loman, right, Death of a Salesman was so successful, I believe, because Willy Loman was like an everyman for white men at the time, right? In like 1949 or whenever it came out. They're like, I see myself in him. I see the relationship between his sons and him. I can understand Willy Loman because I am Willy Loman. I'll tell you straight up, Mark, I'm not Willy Loman, and there are other people who definitely are not Willy Loman or male, but they're in sales and they need to be seen. So I wanted to create a new salesperson for America to root for and at times hate. This isn't just a nice ride, right? It's more like a hostage situation, as I sometimes call it. And that was one of my main aims. But also, to keep it real again, I like those sales movies. I like Boiler Room, right? You either got a wicked jump shot or you sell crack rock, he quotes at the beginning of Biggie, right? I love that. I liked Wolf of Wall Street. I like Glengarry Glen Ross. I like Death of a Salesman. I like these sales movies. And they have their flaws for sure. But it's because I liked them that I wanted to break them in a way, or break what they symbolized, because I thought that they could be improved upon. And I believe that my book and my story of Darren was worthy of standing alongside them in this canon of sales-related literature, sales-related art.
Yeah, absolutely. And it absolutely is. And I just want to say, folks, first of all, make an impulse buy right now. I'm going to ask you to make a second impulse buy at the end of the call, and you're going to also do that. Does that sound fair?
There we go.
Dude, I'm a fast learner, okay?
Yeah.
I just want to say that like it kind of works on these two levels. I mean, it's like this is not only a book that is like a kind of an entertaining, satirical, funny, engrossing narrative. It's also like just chock full of like super interesting sales and business ideas. So there's like a couple reasons at least to buy the book. All right, a few more questions before we get into the audience stuff. So first of all, we got to talk about Sorry to Bother You, because everybody I talk to, this is like the hill I'm going to die on. I think it was one of the great scandals in the Academy history that it didn't even get nominated. In my opinion, that movie was a shoo-in for Best Picture, for Best Screenplay, and should have won Best Picture as well. It wasn't even nominated. So first, I just want to ask you that very succinct question. What do you think about that movie, Sorry to Bother You?
We don't have enough time for me to answer, but I have a I have a Boots Riley story, actually.
Oh, really?
I ran into him while I was writing Black Buck.
Wow.
And I was in like a manic space when I saw him. I didn't expect to see him. And I told him how when I first heard about his movie, I was like, yo, what the F? Like, I don't like this because I'm writing this book. Who knows if I'm even going to be able to sell it? I don't know what's in this movie, but blah, 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 blah. And that comes from Mark's simply scarcity mindset that a lot of us have internalized, especially if you are a Black or brown person, that there can only be one story. And that's absolutely not true. There's enough space for all of us. And it's funny because when I was talking to Boots, he sort of looked at me and was like, yo, are you okay? Like, because I was just like, he's like, and then he mumbled about how he'd get me into an event a couple of days later, like a pre-screening that I already had a ticket to. So what did I think of Sorry to Bother You? I think that it was an incredible film. I really enjoyed it. But I will say, in no uncertain term, Black Buck is not Sorry to Bother You. And people compare it to it, right? I've never, and it's in the marketing copy, all of that, I've never compared it to that. Why? Because while it's entertaining, first off, there are no, let's use a euphemism, horse parts in my book for people who have seen the movie.
Equisapiens, to be fair.
There we go, Equisapiens. There are no Equisapien limbs or members in my book. But two is that Sorry to Bother You, so in my opinion, about a person who happens to be selling, right? And he's doing some telemarketing, but not a salesman. And this is no knock whatsoever. I feel the same way about Pursuit of Happiness. I think Pursuit of Happiness is an amazing movie. I could watch that all day. I love it. But Chris Gardner, right? He was a stockbroker. He was more so someone that just like fell into it and he was doing it. He needed to get ahead and thought he could be good at it. Whereas all of those other sales films and pieces of literature and works that we've named before are about salesmen. It is in their DNA. Sales is in their DNA. They eat it. They sleep it. They crap it. Willie Loman, this guy was not a good salesman, but he was so broken up because he wasn't good and he thought that he's better than he was. We see the same thing with Seth from Boiler Room. We see the same thing with, Jordan Belfort. Look at him. This guy is like the sales dude. And I wanted to write a book about a Black person who had sales embedded into his DNA as well. And that's what we have in the case of Buck. And that's why he's selling this shit to you from page one.
Yeah. I do agree that is a very important distinction. But I just like, this is, again, it's like so my cup of tea. I wish there was like, to me, there's like no shame at all in being compared to Sorry to Bother You. That is like the absolute pantheon for me. And I wish there was like 20 more books every year that were about like all those same issues. But just to be clear, like your book is super funny in a lot of the way, in like a lot of these same satirical ways. There's these conference rooms. One of them there's a conference room named the Bhagavad Gita, and there's like a bunch of stuff like that. There's like the salespeople on the team have names like Frodo and the Duchess. Then like, they do these chants like every day is deals day. The name of the company is someone like SUMWUN. You were just like having fun with this book. And I would say like one of the questions that came from the audience that came across early was, and I think it came when they started hearing you read, they want to know like, how do you write humor like that? And I guess it's a good time to ask that question. Like, it's a funny book. And like, are you like, just how do you go about like writing something funny, figuring out if it's funny or not, and so on?
I don't know how helpful my answer is about to be, but this is the truth. So I didn't want to write 400 pages of doom and gloom and tragedy and trauma, right? We have enough of that, but I also didn't want to shy away from the realities. But for me, and I think I began psychoanalyzing myself a couple months ago about the humor side. And I believe that because of the way that I grew up, humor for me was a defense mechanism. I had to be quick around certain people because if I wasn't quick and if I couldn't snap back, then I would be hurt. That's a fact. But when writing this, as you said, Mark, I was having a blast. I was having so much fun.
It feels that way.
I was having so much fun. And it was also very difficult to write certain parts as well, though. It was difficult for me to have bad things happen to Darren, and then for Darren to in turn subject the people who loved him unconditionally to horrible things as well. That wasn't easy for me. Those parts were emotional. There was one or two parts when I was tearing up, I'm not gonna lie. But all the funny stuff, man, I was having a blast. And to whoever asked that question, thank you for that question. It started with me just not judging myself in the act of creation, telling myself, yo, I don't care like what happens after this book comes out. Of course, I even finished the first draft. Of course, I want an agent. I want it to be published. I want people to read it, but it's just me and the page right now. And I can do absolutely whatever I want. So I allowed myself to have a ton of fun. I allowed myself to go way too far, and then I had to cut some of it out. Like people think that some of what I did in this book is far. I took it further, man. Like there were some things I was like, okay, I gotta cut that out. Like that's just like getting really crazy. So I was having fun. And then there were times when I was rereading it, like second draft or third draft. And if I read something that I thought was supposed to be funny, but it didn't hit, I changed it. I was like, all right, if this isn't actually making me laugh right now, then even if it does make people laugh down the line, it's going to feel a little corny to me and I don't want it in there. Right? Going back to the person I wrote this for first, I want to be able to laugh. Yeah. Like now, Mark, readers are taking screenshots, posting on Instagram, and I'm reading some of them like excerpts, and I'm like, yo, that line was funny. I'm still laughing, and I've read this 11 times, and that's not to gas myself up, but it's to say that I wanted to write something true. I wanted to write something that resonated with me. And on the humor side, I needed to write things that would make me laugh. And also, when people read the book, not all the jokes hit for everyone. There's a lot of different jokes in here, a lot of different types of humor, and sometimes it doesn't resonate, but that's okay.
Yeah, right on. All right, one more question for me, then I'm going to get into some of the audience stuff. And I just like, again, this is like, just getting into your journey as a writer, and like folks, I mean, Mateo's done a lot of interviews online. If you want to find out more about like his journey to being published, there's a lot of that's out there. But like one thing that really struck me, and again, this is like kind of strikes me because it's like shows your sales DNA. I heard you say, quote, and this is talking about like in your publishing journey, kind of explaining your idea to other people. And you said, quote, you have to be able to articulate the why of what you're doing to get people on board. And I just like, that is like a kind of a thing you hear a lot in like leadership books and business books about like, you know, there's people who can explain how to do something, and then there's people who can explain why you're doing something. And the people who can explain why, they're going to motivate people, like big numbers of people. And I just think, again, like I bring it up, not because it's such an unusual idea, but it's because it's such an unusual idea in publishing. And I find so many authors do not know how to succinctly explain like, why does this book exist? Why should someone read it? But you were on that. And so can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, most definitely. When I first came into this game, and again, I wrote 2 books that didn't achieve my aim. I brought a lot of the sales skills that I had like immediately into it. And some of them didn't serve me, right? Like when I came in, I was pitching the presidents of the best agencies because I said, why not? And I quickly learned why not, because like, this isn't going to work. And then you read, don't call agents at all, never call them. And then I said, why not? I used to call 200 people a day and get them to give me their credit card or give me their time, and they didn't know who I was 10 seconds ago. And then I quickly learned why you don't call agents. It's not the same. But there were many things that I took from the world of sales and business that helped me. And one was looking to inspire people and not just motivate, right? Because I could motivate you, I could get you all jacked up, and then you're going to go and get ready to write. And then once you get ready to write, you're like, by the first or second page, you're like, yo, all that motivation wore off. But if I can inspire you and make it about you and extrapolate to why are you here? Literally, why are you here right now? Why are you alive? What are you doing? why are you breathing? If I can bring it to that macro while also keeping in the micro of who you are, that's much harder to get rid of. It does not go away as quickly as possible. So it was important for me to understand my why of this book and then celebrate it and champion it in all conversations. We're doing it right now, but also conversations back with editors, conversations with my agent, even though my conversation with my agent, it was us feeling each other out, but she was very enthusiastic, right? Rather than me having to be like, please, please, please. But having that why also on a more practical level has been my North Star, has been my compass of why am I doing this? Why am I able to muster up enough energy to have a conversation with you right now rather than just being like, yeah, man, I wrote this book. Thanks for your questions. So I think it's important for people to ask themselves, why are you doing what you're doing? Especially when it comes to a creative endeavor. Why are you creating that? And then not being afraid to tell others. And to also know that the first couple of times you tell someone, it's going to sound weird. And it's also not going to sound right. But the greatest thing is that you can just repeat it and redo it and get better over and over again.
Yeah, and part of the reason why it probably doesn't sound right or it sounds a little weird at first is because you're doing something that nobody else is doing, so like, people just aren't used to hearing it. And so like that's the fact that it sounded weird sort of speaks to me about the originality and the need for the project, you know?
Most definitely, Mark. And I'll also tell you, it's funny. I had a couple people in the last week or so say, listen, man, when you were telling me about this book and your journey and what you're doing, I was asking myself, what are you smoking? And right, so it's like you could communicate your why to people that you know well, but it doesn't mean that they'll believe in it or see your vision, and that's okay too, because it has to anchor you, not anyone else. First.
Oh, so beautifully said. I love it, man. And by the way, like I'm gonna take a few audience questions, but I just want to like give a shout out to like, you know, on this tip of like sales, energy, marketing, guerrilla marketing, all that stuff. You are like creating your own merch, which you are wearing right now. Like that thing is fucking cool. He's got other stuff back there, and it's not for sale right now, but like it will be, right?
Yeah, it will be. I'm gonna open up a shop, and for me, it was just about being able to give people something else to hold in their hands beyond the book, something a little bit more tangible. And if they vibe with the book, if they vibe with the message, then they'll be able to represent it. I don't wear anything that doesn't speak to me. I'm wearing a Nipsey Hussle shirt right now. So I thought that would translate for other people too. So yeah, we'll be dropping a shop on buyblackbuck.com when the time comes.
All right, dude, put me on the mailing list. I'm there.
Yeah, and a portion proceeds will go to charity too. We got to help people.
Awesome, man. All right, look, let me get to some of these audience questions. We have just a comment here from Trisha Lewis Fike. She's just commenting about all your things you're saying about sales. Like she says, nothing happens at all in this world until somebody sells something. Another comment was, is, I think that's why this book is so good. You can tell that the author was having a blast writing it. Thank you. I understand you wrote the book and hoped it would help Black folks get ahead in sales, but why should Black folks want to be in such a toxic and racist environment in the first place? Thank you for that question. We told you to ask anything and you did it. Go, Mateo.
Wonderful. So the book isn't just about helping Black people get ahead in sales. It's more so life. If you read the book, you'll see that when Darren breaks the fourth wall and speaks to the reader, every sales tip doubles as a life tip. And I did that on purpose. So it wasn't just super insular. So it wasn't just a myopic view of how to get ahead. And I truthfully believe that if people read this book, and to answer your question right about Black people, if Black people read this book, they will be able to take the tips into their lives and help themselves and others get ahead. So it might not be you entering the world of sales, but if you can better advocate for yourself, that will help you advocating for yourself in a hospital scenario, right? My mom has to constantly advocate for herself in a hospital scenario because people think that she can take more pain because she's a Black woman than other people, right? It will help you advocate on behalf of your community to get what you need. It will help you, I believe, in so many other ways, and more concretely in an interview. Say that you're not trying to get a sales role, but you want to, do XYZ at XYZ company. You will feel better empowered and have an edge rather than going in and saying, I hope I get this job. I hope you get this job. No, I believe that if you read this book, you will say, these people would be lucky to have me.
Yeah.
Now, let me explain why with confidence so that they understand it too, and I'm going to get this job. So that's not the full answer, but those are a few things that come to mind right now.
That's awesome, man. Right on. All right, another question from a reader. Any advice for young writers? My daughter loves to write, but it seems like she gets so much in her imagination that it's hard for her to create a story.
I don't want to stifle her imagination. Maybe she's meant to write a book that goes off in a million tangents. There are many experimental works out there that do that don't convey to a perceived standard of what a book is or has to be. So my advice to her is, I, as a writer, would like to see her run wild for 50 pages. I want to see if her imagination can actually last for 50 pages or 100 pages or 200 pages. And if she reaches a limit, then why did she reach that limit? And maybe she could build in certain limits or edit it in a way where it'll be a little bit more coherent rather than, and I'm not saying this is rambling, but I know that when you jump from one idea to another, it can be incoherent. Maybe she could give it a more concrete shape, and it could be something that other people want to read, but first and foremost, something that is meaningful to her and is powerful. But beyond that, I'd say coming to the page without fear, or if you have fear, pushing through it and knowing that no book is going to come if you don't begin writing. So just begin.
Right on. Another old business saying I like, how do you start something? By starting it.
Exactly.
So, all right, a couple more audience questions, and I have one final question. So just real quick, what was it like to get the Jenna Book Club pick?
It was cool. It was cool, most definitely. I think any writer, right, it's an honor to be picked for something that only 11 other things are picked for in a year, right? I was very happy when I first got that email a couple months ago. And I've been interacting with people in the Read with Jenna private Facebook group, and they're wonderful people. And for me, it was also somewhat sociological, right? To see how this book would resonate with people who may or may not have ever met someone like Darren before. So it's been a blast because I right, in no uncertain terms, I know who I had in mind while I was writing this book. And Jenna's book club has a variety of people. It's not just one type of person. But I also wanted the book to be read by people beyond the people I had in mind. So I'm happy that more people are able to get the book, and hopefully it'll inspire some critical thinking and then action.
Right on. Great. All right. I'm going to try to squeeze both these in because, guys, I just can't get to all the questions. We're sort of running out of time.
Wow,
here,
there's a lot. Are there a lot?
Well, there's like two more that are like actual questions and not just sort of comments. But as a debut, what surprised you most about the publishing process?
It's a lot. It's a lot. And this is me. You can feel that I am someone who has a lot of energy, that I believe I was built for this. But what surprised me most is just how much there is going on. And when you have a debut that comes out and it's getting a lot of press, and I'm extremely grateful for it. This is what I dreamed of. I'm so happy to be here. This is what I've asked for years. I prayed on this every single day. It was one of the main thoughts on my mind for years. This moment, being able to sit across from someone like Mark and talk about my book, that's a real physical thing and not just in my head. But what I wasn't expecting is the deluge of people wanting your time, of unexpected opportunities. I thought that if the book did well, right, then I would get a couple opportunities. There'd be this, that, the other. But it's a lot to get to. And I am someone who believes that if someone's writing me a comment or sending me a message and they have read my book, out of respect, I want to respond, because they didn't have to read my book. No one has to read anything, right? No one has to do anything in general other than eat and get some rest. But this is time. Reading this book, the way I look at it, is time that no one's ever going to get back. So I want to respect that if someone sends me a comment, and I try to get to as many of those as possible in a timely fashion, which is becoming harder day by day. So I think that was what was most unexpected, just the flood of opportunities and things that would come, and me having to figure out how to manage that while also take care of myself.
Yeah. All right. So final question from the audience, like kind of on that note about the deluge of stuff coming in. So one, this is like, I'll put in a question of my own, but one is like, I heard there might be some Hollywood action on this, number one. Number two, somebody wanted from the audience to know, is there a next book idea that you're like already working on?
Great, thank you for those questions. And if we don't get to these questions, just hit me up on Instagram and I'll get to it when I can. And we have an event tonight. I actually forgot, an event at 9 p.m. Eastern with Book Soup. Go to my Instagram, Ask Mateo. It's in the link. It's with Jay Ellis from Insecure and another homie. But to answer your question, okay, yeah, we got some Hollywood stuff in the works. News soon come, and I can't wait to be able to tell some crazy stories that I've experienced with some of these people, man. Two, another book. I got another book in the works. I feel fortunate that, again, it just comes down to not judging myself and not believing that any idea is a really bad one. I get ideas all the time. I write them down in the Evernote app on my iPhone. And I know that it's an idea to pursue if months later I'm still excited and if I've still been jotting down notes for it. So I have probably 4 to 5 solid ideas for other books. And I am working on another right now. Well, not right now because its promo runs crazy, but around this time.
Dude, all good news, man, and all richly deserved. I'm so psyched. We've gone over, but the energy in this interview is just fire right now, so it's sort of hard to reel it in. But like, I'm gonna ask my last question here. This is the question I ask to every author that comes on my program. So imagine that there is an ideal reader for Black Buck. Imagine that they are just getting everything you're putting out there. They're getting all the jokes, they're getting all the references, they understand your characters, they're in the perfect place in their life to hear what you have to say. Everything is ideal for this reader. Now imagine that reader finishes, closes the book. Tell me in like a word or a phrase, what is the feeling that that reader has?
Visibility.
Right
yeah,
on,
visibility. My first thought was shock. because I think that's what most people come away from being like, what the hell did I just read? But if we're talking about that ideal reader, they will be seen. It goes back to the dedication. They will feel seen, and I think they will feel empowered, I hope.
What a great way to end. All right, folks, look, do it. Buy the book, Black Buck. This has been awesome. I mean, what an interview, man. And like, by the way, I just like have to say, like, what an incredibly motivating person you are just to listen to. Like, you have a future in motivational speaking. You also have a future in storytelling for sure. But yeah, dude, I mean, it was just like, and as an interview subject and as a reader of your work, I mean, like, this has just been amazing. I was getting notes that the viewership kept growing during our interview, which is like, I mean, most of the time it just like levels off, but I guess it kept growing. I guess people were scrolling through. They decided to stick around, and it's no secret why. So Mateo, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you're so busy right now, but we really appreciate your time.
Mark, thank you for your time, for your incredible questions and your energy. And everyone who viewed this or will view this, thank you for your time as well. Be well.
All right, folks, we'll see you next week with Mark Lehner on the Thoughtful Bro. Thanks for joining.